Hello and welcome to Hardy's Books. Now, a lot of you were, to my surprise, interested in the opinions of a complete randomer, i.e. me, as to what my top 10 fantasy books were. Now, if you're interested in fantasy, you're probably also a little bit interested in sci-fi. So today I wanted to go through my top 10 sci-fi and speculative fiction books. A few ground rules before we start, which if you watched the first video you'll already know, these are not the best sci-fi/speculative fiction books. These are the ones I vibe with. I am not afraid to include multiple books by the same author or from the same series, although this one I don't think there are multiple from the same series here. And this time, a special bonus asterisk. These are the Hardy's Books top 10. And Hardy's Books consists of me, Ross, and my lovely partner, Laura, who is currently doing her makeup over there. Laura has insisted that she should get 2 slots on this list, and so stick around because you'll see 2 of her faves at the end. With all that out of the way, I'm actually going to start with a book that isn't in my top 10 because I want to talk about it. And that book is Hyperion by Dan Simmons. This book is the epitome of didn't stick the landing for me. If you don't know the format of Hyperion, it's kind of told like Canterbury Tales. There are multiple tales in it. So you could almost say it's like a short story collection. And within that collection, there are 2 of the best sci-fi stories ever told. And yet, it is not in my top 10. Why? Well, because Dan Simmons needs to have a cold shower. I wish I could put this in my top 10. It is groundbreaking. It has incredible ideas and all of that. But I'm sorry, Dan. You're not going to be there. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. Starting the top 10 properly this time, and this is a book I've already spoken about on this channel, and that is Exhalation by Ted Chiang. If you want to find out more about this book, again, it's another series of short stories, you can go click. I'm pointing roughly where I think that thing's going to come up. Click that there to go watch the video about that. This is just a fantastic collection of short stories, and again, features some of my favourite sci-fi short stories ever. It's weird how sci-fi kind of lends itself quite well to the short story format. I think because, as Ursula Le Guin would say, it's all about the what-ifs. Sometimes a what-if can't sustain a whole book, but it can sustain a short story really well. That's my theory, I think, why sci-fi is such a good kind of short story genre. Let's talk about Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, who is one of my favourite living authors. This book was published in 2014. It takes on an interesting character, reading it after the pandemic, which I did. Laura read it before. And it's all about a hyper-virulent, hyper-fatal virus that is sweeping the world. And it follows a narrative during the pandemic and then long after the pandemic. The way that Emily St. John Mandel writes is all about these. It's like she creates this image that is so resonant and so full of like aesthetic charge that it just sticks with you and the kind of thing that you will never forget. So definitely recommend Station 11, as I also recommend. Oh God, sorry, I just creased the top of the book. Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, another book that features a pandemic. Weirdly, but I think that's mostly because she actually wrote it during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it has one of the best author self-inserts I have ever seen. So to the point where it was obviously deliberate. To put it in perspective, one of the main characters is an author who wrote a book about a pandemic. Wonder who that could be. This is another time travel narrative, so similar to Night Watch, except not at all like Night Watch. It follows characters on 4 different timelines. And it also touches on the simulation hypothesis, so no shortage of big ideas. It's another fantastic book, and the way it comes together at the end is one of the most satisfying endings to a book I think I've ever read. And next on the list is The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. This is an alternative history book where the Nazis won World War II, and it's set later in time, seeing how the world developed differently following that historical outcome. One of the reasons I find this book so interesting is because it has a classic example of a novel within a novel. So there is this novel in this world called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, which essentially tells the story of our reality, i.e. where the Allied powers won World War II. It's a really interesting narrative device, and I highly recommend that you check this one out. I haven't seen the TV series, but I enjoyed the book a lot, so do look at that one. The next book on this list is a classic, and I just want to say my copy is better than your copy. It is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Isn't that amazing? I was looking for a copy of Frankenstein that I liked for so long, and this eventually I found in a bookshop in Ramsgate, and I didn't know this was what I needed, but this is what I needed. Frankenstein is the oldest book on this list. It was published in 1818 and was written during what was known as the Year Without Summer. So during this very cold year, Mary Shelley travelled with her husband, Percy Shelley, to Geneva, to Lord Byron's house, where they all got around, and the cold weather meant that it was the perfect atmosphere for telling old German ghost stories. And the seed of this book developed in Mary Shelley's mind during this trip. And I've got a quote here. She said, "I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then on the working of some powerful engine show signs of life and stir with an uneasy half-vital motion. Frightful must it be, for supremely frightful would be the effect of any human endeavour to mock the stupendous mechanism of the creator of the world." The subtitle of this book is The Modern Prometheus, and you can see, if you know your Greek myths, how this all kind of ties together, and the result is one of the best science fiction horror stories ever written. Following on from that, we have one of my favourite authors who appeared in the last list with A Wizard of Earthsea. This time we're talking about The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. This is a fascinating study into what society might look like if humans were androgynous and had no sex nor concept of gender. It's told through the perspective of an ambassador called Genli I, who goes to this planet called Gethin, where he has to interact with this completely different society. This is considered one of the earliest and most pioneering examples of feminist science fiction. Once again, Ursula Le Guin is ahead of her time and writing books that still feel relevant and fascinating today. We're cracking through. Next on the list is Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Time. I noticed Library of a Viking did a video on this recently, where he called it the most terrifying sci-fi novel he had read. I don't know if I'd agree in that I'm not an arachnophobe. Maybe he is. If you're scared of spiders, this is not the book to read, because it is about a terraforming experiment gone wrong, where rather than giving this evolutionary accelerating virus to some monkeys, by quirk of fate, they end up administering it to some spiders. And it plots the development of the society, the evolution of these spiders over millennia as they become more and more intelligent and their society becomes more and more advanced. Adrian Tchaikovsky somehow manages to write from a completely alien perspective, but one that is somehow relatable because we know spiders, we've seen them around. Check it out, Children of Time. It is a masterpiece. The sun is actually just coming over the camera, which is really irritating. The next book is Player of Games by Ian M. Banks. This was a real surprise for me. I hadn't read any Ian M. Banks before, or any books under his other name, Ian Banks. This book is part of the Culture series, which is set in a shared universe where there is this ultra advanced society which is run by an AI called the Culture, and in a society humans and droids live together and socialize together and are friends. The protagonist is a man called Gerger. He's a bit of a Magnus Carlsen-esque kind of character where he's become so good at games that he has become bored, and he's looking for a new challenge. And right at this moment, he is given an opportunity to go play in a game in a society which has been uncolonized. And the rules of this game are hyper complex, and the role of this game in their society is they run a tournament where the winner becomes the new ruler of the society. Once again, this is another exploration of gender in sci-fi. The other society have three sexes, one of which is the apex sex, which is essentially the one that holds all the power. Dark in places, but also surprisingly funny in places. And I just think it's a very well-crafted story and one I'd highly recommend. I've done 8 books now, and I think I've hogged enough time. I think it's time that we pass over to the lovely Laura to go through her 2 faves. Yeah.
Hi, guys.
You're going to sit on me?
No,
I'm
you
gonna
need
move.
to move up.
I can't move. I'm going to stand in front of the light. Should I stand in front of the light?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, okay, hold on.
This is a professional operation, guys.
All right, I'm standing here to try and block the sun from the camera. Is it work? It seems to be working.
Okay, guys. The first book that I want to talk to you about is the incredible Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. You have probably heard of Ray Bradbury. He wrote a number of fantastic books across multiple genres. There's Something Wicked This Way Comes.
It's a very good book.
He wrote The Martian Chronicles, which is a series of short stories, and he wrote The Illustrated Man. This book was written in the early 1950s during the McCarthyism era in the United States. And Ray Bradbury was very much affected by the book burnings carried out by the Nazis during World War II. It really sat with him. It was something that really bothered him dreadfully, as I'm sure it would all of us watching. It's also inspired by the ideological oppression that was going on in the Soviet Union at the time that this book was written. So there's an awful lot of interesting sort of historical context that you need to consider when approaching a book like this. Consider the time that it was written and the things that were going on in the author's world at the time that they're writing. Kind of how Ross was discussing when Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. What is this book about? Fahrenheit 451 is set in a dystopian American society in which books are banned, and people who read are persecuted. The main character is a chap called Guy Montag. Guy Montag is a fireman, but firemen are not as we know them today. They are employed to find people who are hoarding books and burn them. The books, the houses, the people in the houses if they refuse to leave. Without giving too much away, over the course of the book, his perspective changes. He comes into contact with some dissident voices, a neighbour called Clarice, that is a 16-year-old girl who's a real sort of free spirit. His wife, a woman called Millie or Mildred, who is completely enamoured with what they call the parlour walls, which is a giant TV screen which takes up one whole wall of the living space. If you are looking for a really fantastic read about a dystopian nightmare, in my opinion, we love books, please do give Fahrenheit 451 a read. And this is a particularly beautiful edition. This is from the Folio Society. It's got these beautiful illustrations all the way through, and that I think is that is his wife with her parlour friends, her friends on her parlour wall. The final book that I wanted to talk about is Oryx and Crake, which is by the inimitable Margaret Atwood, author of The Handmaid's Tale. There was an HBO adaptation of The Handmaid's Tale recently that I'm sure most of you watched. Alias Grace, The Blind Assassin. It is the first book in the Mad Adam trilogy, and follows a single main character who, when we first meet him, is known as Snowman, and who is living with a community of humanoid, like genetically engineered humanoids called Crakers. It seems to us and to Snowman that humanity has been completely wiped out by some kind of plague. And the narrative of this book looks at the events leading up to where we first meet Snowman, when he was brought up alongside a prodigal science student named Glenn, but who he knew as Crake.
Oh, yes, that's the name on the cover.
Not just a hat stand.
Also a hat stand.
So, yeah, there are some really interesting themes throughout this book of genetic experimentation, the ethics around genetic engineering, pharmaceutical engineering. Again, without giving too much away, turns out that the plague that has wiped out humanity may well have been, genetically engineered to do so. A really, really, really interesting read. And on that note, I'll hand you back to your esteemed host.
We have covered 10 books there that you should all go and enjoy and read them as soon as you can. Please tune in for more slightly weird videos like this one.
And like and subscribe. We're trying our best here, and yeah, hopefully if you're enjoying our content, please do give us a thumbs up. We have a shop. If you are interested in lovely editions of old sci-fi and fantasy books, as we are, head to hardysbooks.co.uk.
Yeah.
And find us on Instagram.
Yes.
Find us on Instagram at hardysbooks. Do all the things.
Do everything. Bye.
Bye.